beautiful people, and welcome. In today's video, we are going to be working with solving equations by using the completing the square method. As always, I am human, so if I make a mistake, that's okay. Please let me know where the mistake occurs so that way I may learn from it, you may learn from it, and then we all may learn from it. All right, let's go ahead and get started. I am going to be referencing the completing the square steps that we went over in my previous video. If you haven't watched that, please do so. Step number 1 is set the equation equal to 0. So here's my equation. I'm going to set it equal to 0. Step number 2 is subtract or add the constant term from both sides. In this case, here's my constant. It is a negative, so I'm going to add both sides, a 95. So here I have x squared minus 14x is equal to a positive 95. Step number 3, it says divide all terms by the leading coefficient. Now leading coefficient is the number out in front here in front of x. Since there is no leading coefficient, that leading coefficient means it is 1, and we don't really need to divide by anything. Step number 4, in a thinking bubble, take b and divide it by 2, and then you want to square it. So here's my thinking bubble. We'll do it here. We want to take b divided by 2, and then we want to take that answer. We want to square it to get our new c value. So b in this case is negative 14. Make sure you grab the symbol, the sign in front of it. That is your b value. Divided by 2, negative 14 divided by 2 is a negative 7. And we still need to square that because I didn't square it yet. When I square it, that gives me a positive 49. So I'm going to bring it back here. Now you are at step number 6 when you're going to take this new c value and you're going to add it to both sides of your equation. So you have 95 plus 49, and you have plus 49 here. Now, if you watched my previous video, you know there is a secret step here or a secret cheating method. Your b divided by 2, that's going to be your factors. So my b divided by 2, before you square it, so this negative 7, that's going to be my two factors here. So I have x minus 7 and x minus 7 as my two factors. And then I have 95 plus my 49, which gives me 144. Now here's my first check. If this number, get a highlighter, if this number is negative, that means you have a no solution. If it is positive, then you can continue. 144 is a positive number, so I'm going to continue. Here I'm going to rewrite this as a factored squared. From this point here, I'm going to rewrite this in two different ways. Oh, I skipped a step. Let's square root it first. Let's square root it. That would be step number 9. We're going to take the square root of both sides. Now, whenever you take the square root, you have a plus and a minus on this side here. This index of 2 undoes the exponent of 2. So we have left over x minus 7 is equal to a positive square root of 144. Now, what is the square root of 144? Looking at our previous cheat sheet, the square root of 144 is 12. So I have a positive 12, and then here x minus 7 is equal to a negative 12. Again, how did we get from 144? I took the square root of 144, which gave me an answer of 12. Continuing to solve for x, I'm going to add 7 to both sides. X is equal to 7, 8, 9, so that's 19. And I'm going to add 7 here. Counting up, I have 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, which means I have 5 negatives. So x is equal to negative 5. All right, let's go ahead and move on to question number 2. Question number 2, step number 1, you are going to set it equal to 0. Step number 2 is you're going to add or subtract that constant term. In this case, it's 32. Now you can do this question a different method. That's okay because 9 is a perfect square, but we're just going to stick to those steps that we originally came up with in the previous video. Step number 3 is take your leading coefficient and divide by your leading coefficient. Since we do have a number here that is a perfect square, you're going to end up with fractions. Now, fractions are okay. They want to be loved as well. Just simplify those fractions here. So 3 goes into 12 4 times. 3 goes into 9 3 times. And 32 divided by 9 doesn't go in perfectly, but it can simplify. 32 divided by 9, it simplifies. It doesn't simplify, so we have 32 ninths here. Now, again, don't let these fractions scare you. It's okay. In a thinking bubble, we're going to do exactly the same thing we did before. Take your b value, which is a positive 4/3. You're going to divide that by 2, and then you're going to square it. Now, in order to divide fractions, you're going to multiply by the reciprocal. So here's my 4/3, keep. You're going to change the symbol to multiplication. Now 2, you're going to flip it. So that means I have not 2, but I have a 1/2. Multiplying across, I have 4 times 1 is 4. 3 times 2 is 6. Again, that has not been squared yet. You can square it, then simplify, or you can simplify it, then square it. It's your choice. But let's square it. So that means I have 4/6 times 4/6. That means I have 16/36. And 16/36, we have to simplify that fraction, equals to 4/9. This is us simplifying. And this is our squaring. So we get 4/9. So we take that here. We're going to add that to both sides. Now don't worry don't worry about the fractions. They're okay. Remember, my cheat secret over here. The value you had before you squared it, that's going to be your 2 factors for your factored form. Now in this case, 4/6 does need to be simplified because 2 can go into 4 and 2 can go into 6. So we have 2 times 2 is 4. 3 times 2, so we have 2/3 is what we have. So we have x plus 2/3, x plus 2/3. And then on this side here, again, don't let this scare you. 9 and 9 have common denominators. So that means when you add in fractions, the common denominator stays. So this 9 and this 9 becomes 9. It doesn't change when you're adding. 32 plus 4 is 36. Now you can simplify that one step further. 36 divided by 9, that is 4. So I have x plus 2/3. I have x plus 2/3, and that's equal to 4. This step, we're going to rewrite this as a perfect square, equal to 4. I'm going to take the square root, both sides, make sure this is a plus and a minus. The index and the exponent, they undo each other, so I have x plus 2/3 is equal to the square root of 4 is 2, so I have a plus and a minus 2. Now we're not done. We still have to create 2 separate equations. So I'm going to shift it up here. And I'm going to rewrite that question as x plus 2/3 is equal to plus and minus 2. Separating this out into 2 separate equations, I have x plus 2/3 is equal to positive 2, and x plus 2/3 is equal to a negative 2. We are subtracting fractions here. So we're subtracting 2/3 both sides. These undo each other, so I have x is equal to 2 minus 2/3. This is x is equal to negative 2 minus 2/3. Now, whenever you have fractions and you're adding or subtracting, you have to have common denominators. So in order to get common denominators, I'm going to create 2 into a fraction, and I'm going to change the denominator by multiplying by 3 top and bottom. Same thing here on this side. I'm going to create negative 2 into a fraction. I'm going to multiply by 3 top and bottom because I need the denominator to be 3 in order to subtract. 3 times 2 is 6. 3 times 1 is 3. Minus, minus. 6 minus 2 is 4. 3 stays. This one here, we have x is equal to negative 2 times 3, which is negative 6. 3 times 1 is 3, minus 2/3. 6, 7, 8. And I get negative 8/3 as my answer. Now, a lot of fractions here, but that's okay. That is okay. Let's try one more here. We did a similar question, 2 more. We did a similar question on the previous video with something with a fraction. Now, if you see a fraction in the original equation, get rid of it. Take the denominator, multiply each term by that denominator. In this case, we're multiplying everything by 2. So I end up with something new. 2 and 2 cross out, so I have x squared minus 5 times 2 is 10x, and 18 times 2, that is 36. Set this equation equal to 0, step number 1. Step number 2 is add or subtract both sides your constant, which is 36. So 36 goes away. I have x squared minus 10x is equal to positive 36 on this side. Thinking bubble off to the side, we need 2 things. We need b divided by 2. Then we need to square that value. B here is negative 10. Negative 10 divided by 2 is a negative 5. Remember, this negative 5 is super important before you square it, as this is your factor. We do, however, need to square it for our new c value. Negative 5 times negative 5 is a positive 25. This here is our new c. New constant. Taking that 25, I'm going to add it to both sides. I'm going to change colors here. Add it to both sides, so 25 here plus a 25 here. Immediately here, I can jump into my factors because I know what that factor is going to be, because I know what b divided by 2 is, which is negative 5. So x minus 5, x minus 5. Here, 36 plus 25 gives me 61. This one here, rewrite it as factor squared equal to 61. You're going to square root both sides. Remember, the index and the exponent of 2, they undo each other, so you have x minus 5 left over. And when you're taking the square root of something, you're going to have a plus and a minus outside of that. So therefore, you have plus minus square root of 61. Now, 61 does not simplify to anything pretty, so we keep it. Now, we got to do 2 separate equations here. X minus 5 is equal to a positive square root of 61. And x minus 5 is equal to a negative square root of 61. Now, because this is a square root, this isn't a secret bubble, you cannot, again, you cannot go inside of that square root. So when we are adding 5 to both sides, that happens outside of the square root, not inside. So here I have x is equal to 5 plus the square root of 61. And here I have x equals to 5 minus the square root of 61. Now again, you can keep this separate answers or you can combine them. It is up to you. Let's do one last example. I was going to say equation. It is equation. So let's do one more. Step number 1 is set it equal to 0. Step number 2 is subtract or add. In this case, we are adding. I have 3x squared minus 4x is equal to 20. Now this one again, it looks like will give us a fraction. That's okay. We're going to divide by the leading coefficient. So I have x squared minus 4/3 x. That's equal to 20 divided by 3. Cannot be simplified, so I'm going to keep it as 20 divided by 3. Thinking bubble time. My b value is a negative 4/3. I'm going to divide that by 2, and I'm going to square it. Again, how do we divide fractions? We multiply it by the reciprocal. So if you have a fraction, you're multiplying by 1/2. So I have a negative 4/3 times 1/2. That gives me a negative 4/6. I'm going to simplify that fraction since we didn't do that in our previous example. I'll simplify it. So we have negative 4 divided by 2 is 2. 6 divided by 2 is 3. Now I'm going to square that, which gives me a negative 2 times negative 2, 3 times 3. So my new constant is 4/9. This is my new c. Now again, we're doing a little happy dance whenever we get our b divided by 2 value, because this simplified fraction here gives me my value for my factoring. The new c gets added. So I add 4/9 on one side, you add 4/9 on the other side. So this here, we already know what the factors are. Factors are x minus 2/3 and x minus 2/3. On this side, we don't have common denominators. Notice that this denominator is a 3, this denominator is a 9, so we have to force it to be a common denominator. I'm going to multiply this by 3, I'm going to multiply this by 3 in order to get 9 in the denominator. That means I have 3 times 2 is 6, 3 times 3 is 9, plus 4. So that means here I'm going to combine these into 1. So I have x minus 2/3 squared equal to 9 stays as we're adding fractions. 60 plus 4, 60 plus 4, that is 64. And does 64 divide by 9? Is that pretty? That is not pretty. That's okay. We can keep it. So here we have it. Almost take the square root of both sides. Again, this is secret 2 in here for their index. So we have x minus 2/3 is equal to, don't forget your plus or minus, plus minus the square root of 64 and 9. Now here's another thinking bubble for you. Whenever you're doing square roots, you can take the square root of the top numerator and you can take the square root of the bottom denominator, separately. So you can do this separately. So the square root of 64 divided by 9 can be rewritten as 64 square rooted and 9 square rooted. 64 square rooted, 8 times 8 is 64, so that means I can have an 8 here. 9 is 3 times 3, so I can have a 3 here. So we can simplify this further. I'm going to shift this paper up. Moving on here, we're going to just need a few more inches of paper. So this can be simplified. So what I have now is x minus 2/3 is equal to plus or minus, and we have 8/3 as our simplified fraction that has already been taken the square root of. Two equations. We have x minus 2/3 is equal to positive 8/3. Let me shift this up even more. And we have x minus 2/3 is equal to a negative 8/3. Now I am doing a happy dance because I see a 3 in the denominator and I see a 3 in the denominator. That means I don't have to create common denominators. They are already there for me. So I'm going to add 2/3 both sides here. X is equal to 8/3 plus 2/3. That means 8, 9, 10. 10/3 positive is one of my answers. Here I'm going to add 2/3 both sides. X is equal to 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that's 6. I like to count upwards when I'm dealing with a positive and a negative. So here's 6, and my denominator stays the same as 3, but I'm doing even a more happy dance because negative 6 divided by 3 is a negative 2. So I have x is equal to negative 2 as one of my answers, and x is equal to 10/3 as my secondary answer. All right, beautiful people, thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!